Thanks everybody for being with us this afternoon. Excited to talk to y'all, hopefully very briefly, about some things we've seen recently and ransomware issues for our K-12 clients. If anybody doesn't know me who's on here, I think most of you do. I'm Adam Griffin. I'm a partner in our Jackson office. My primary practice and area is data privacy and security, with a focus on K-12 education. Part of that involves working on incident response planning, and part of it involves working on actual incidents. I work with a team here at Adams and Reese all over the U.S. for clients all over the U.S. We deal with everything from cyber insurance to internal policies and controls, regulatory compliance, you name it. So part of our team that deals in these areas has handled ransomware attacks, everything from the largest to the smallest. One of my partners, Roy Hadley in Atlanta, handled the city of Atlanta's ransomware attack. We've handled ransomware attacks for small schools and school districts, and pretty much everything in between. So there's not much that we have not seen. And there's a disclaimer on the page. It wouldn't be a good lawyer presentation without a good disclaimer. This is, of course, not legal advice. If you have specific questions, please direct those to your counsel. I know that we have a broad range of attendees on today, everything from people in IT to people on the administrative side. So I want to just really quickly define what ransomware is, just for everybody's edification. I want to start with traditional ransomware, which is malware. It's similar to a virus, but bad software that's designed to block access to a system or data on that system, usually by encrypting the files. So you come into school one day and there's a message on everybody's computer that says your files have been encrypted. If you ever want to access your systems again, email this address, pay us Bitcoin to this address. And sometimes you don't even get that much information. With one of the ransomware variants we've seen a lot, which is called Ryuk, this is what you see. It's just Ryuk, and there's an email address there that you send an email to. When you do that, they'll tell you, hey, we want you to pay us money. And that's how the typical ransomware works. You pay them money, and they give you the key to decrypt your files and get access to your computers again. So how does this happen? Usually, but not always, it starts with somebody that clicks a link in a phishing email. So a user on the system clicks a link in an email, and that leads the attacker to get access to the system. The attackers then install and use a number of malware tools to get access to additional systems and to propagate and spread that ransomware and that malware throughout your environment, throughout your network. They target servers, backups, high-value systems, things that you can't function well without. And they also try to spread to as many endpoints as possible, and then charge a ransom based on usually based on how many computers they were able to encrypt. Once they feel like they've infected enough, one day they trigger the ransomware, it encrypts all the files, and you get the message like this. Just a brief word on who these people are. They are criminals. They're absolutely criminals who perpetrate these attacks, but they're very, very organized criminals. It is run very much like a business, and a lot of it is done by foreign organized crime. We've even seen some state actors, some foreign governments in this space that perpetrate these attacks because they're very lucrative. They're making lots of money doing these. And emphasis on the word organized and organized crime. Many of them will assign you basically a customer service rep who you deal with throughout the ransom. The different entities that perpetrate these have reputations that some of them seek to have a good reputation, that if you pay them the money, they'll help you get your data back. So it's an interesting world that these criminals operate in, and their structure and their sophistication is something that surprises us routinely. Another note, they're almost never caught, and if law enforcement figures out who they are, it's pretty unusual that they're actually brought to justice. They're usually in places that don't have extradition treaties with the United States. So that's something I get asked a lot about, so I thought I'd mention it. Our first trend that we've seen recently is a huge increase in ransomware, and specifically ransomware targeting K-12. We've seen this anecdotally from our clients. We've also seen lots of reporting on this, and the insurance companies and others that we work with in this industry, the vendors and other people, other contacts that I have, are saying the same thing. The insurance people are saying claims are way up. Our vendors that we work with are busier than ever. So ransomware is definitely on the rise, and ransomware targeting K-12 is definitely on the rise. This is an alert we put out on our website back in June, and it was based on an alert from the FBI. They call it a private industry notification. And the gist of that was that cyber actors were likely to increase targeting of K-12 schools during the pandemic because there's more opportunity. There's more remote connections. More people are using the RDP, the remote desktop protocol, to get access into systems. So there were a lot of COVID-related opportunities, and we've seen an uptick in ransomware that corresponded with that, especially targeting schools. I'll tell you, you see these news articles about ransomware attacks, and you see some people purport to say how many have been perpetrated against K-12 organizations. Those numbers have to be low, just based on the number that we see and deal with. When I read those and they're talking about, oh, there's been 120, 160 attacks this year, no way that's right. There have to have been a lot more than that. I think that nobody really knows just how bad this problem is. But I do know that anecdotally, we've seen many more incidents this year than we have in years prior. I think there's a lot of people hear me say that, and they say, yeah, but it won't happen to me. Well, everybody that it happens to has thought that at some point. It's simply not true. It can and it will happen to you. So it's on the rise. It's something that everybody really needs to pay attention to. Another big trend that we've seen, and this is the main thing I want to talk about today, is a trend in the increase in double ransom attacks. So as ransomware has proliferated, on the whole, everybody started to get a lot better at protecting themselves against it. The most important thing people were doing to protect against traditional ransomware is we're getting better at backups. So people were, put in better backup systems. People had offline or air-gapped backups, and so when the ransomware encrypted their systems, they were able to just blow everything away, restore from that backup, and never even contact the criminal actors. And many of our clients were able to do that. Paying the ransom was never even on the table because they had a backup and they just restored from the backup and moved on with life. That's great for us, right? That's great for our clients. That's really bad for the attackers. They're not making as much money. Less people are paying ransoms. More people were able to restore themselves. So the attackers, like any good business, realized they needed to open a new revenue stream. And that's the double ransom. It's also called double extortion. There's some other names as well. What happens here is when those attackers were in your system, when they were spreading the malware and they had access to your backups, to your servers, to your important things, they also took some of your data with them or exfiltrated it. And then they come and email you or contact you later and say, not only have we installed ransomware, we've also stolen your data. And if you don't pay us some money, we're going to release that data on the dark web. And this will obviously not be good for you or for the people whose data is released. So a word first on what the dark web is. You probably hear about it in TV shows and movies. And what is the dark web? It has a scary name, and there is a lot of bad stuff on the dark web. It's really just a collection of website pages and sites that you can't see. You can't Google and find these. You have to use a special browser that's called Tor to access these sites and pages. And what it is it's kind of the seedy back alley of the internet. You can buy credit card numbers, you can buy drugs and guns and hacked Netflix accounts and software. You can actually procure on the dark web ransomware as a service. So if you're a criminal, you can hire another criminal who will help you perpetrate these ransomware attacks against other people. Allegedly, you can also pay someone to have someone killed. There's murder for hire on the dark web. That's supposedly a scam, and one that I hope to never find out about, but there's lots of seedy things there. And so, yes, people do sell personal information on the dark web. And yes, there is a real risk that someone could release your information there. So this double ransom that I'm talking about has been going on for some time, actually for years. It's not totally new, but it has gotten a lot more prevalent in the attacks that we handle, especially in K-12. We saw recently a very large vendor that handles a lot of data for nonprofits and schools, Blackbaud. They had a breach where this happened to them, and we've seen it with some others as well. And K-12 makes a good target for, first of all, for ransomware, but also for double ransoms. I mean, the data that we have is often very valuable. Information on young people that can be used to steal their identities has value. Younger people don't have bad credit. They don't have a bunch of debt like the rest of us do. So they're generally clean credit reports. But we also have employee data, which is usually going to include name, address, social, and then for direct deposits, bank account and a routing number. If you're a criminal, what more could you want? So we have very valuable data. And so the odds of K-12 organizations paying these ransoms to get their data to be quote unquote not released is high. And I mentioned the risk is real. This has actually happened. This was this year, actually last month. And this was in Las Vegas. The Clark County School District refused to pay the ransom, and their data was actually released by the attackers. So called their bluff, and the attackers said, "Well, watch this." So with that in mind, I want to talk briefly about preparation and prevention for these attacks. As I mentioned earlier, one critical thing you can do to help guard against traditional ransomware is to have good backups, air-gapped offline backups that the attackers can't get into to infect, because believe me, they will try. If they can't infect your backups, you restore from that backup, that's going to defeat the ransomware. However, with a double ransom, that good backup is not going to do us any good. They still have our data, and they're still threatening to release it if we don't pay them money. And so to be effective, our prevention needs to be more than just a backup. We need to prevent them from ever accessing our systems in the first instance. So how do we do that? That's a part of a much longer conversation and a much more complicated issue. But there are a few things that I think are pretty universally accepted as things you can do. And the number one way is through user training and awareness. You can have the best antivirus, you can have the best firewalls, the best everything, and you have one user with elevated privileges that clicks a link in a phishing email and enters those credentials right into some website. All your great protections are for naught at that point. So, preventing what some people call the human firewall to detect phishing emails and avoid clicking on them is really important. You can do that through phishing campaigns that are, structured and targeted. You can also just do it through informal training sessions. I know the IT people listening don't want anything or don't need anything else to do, but it's a good idea anytime all of your teachers and staff are together to give your IT people a few minutes to talk about these issues. That also doesn't cost you any money. It just costs some time. It's not we have to pay a vendor to do this. Another really important thing, and these are based on what we see in the attacks we handle, what would have prevented these attacks. Another really important thing is to ensure your systems are updated. So many of the ransomware attacks we've handled originated with an endpoint, a device on the network that was running an out-of-date operating system or wasn't properly patched or updated. A lot of ransomware attacks use known vulnerabilities. These are issues with Windows that have been known for some time, that there's been a patch out for over a year, and that they're just looking for those systems that aren't patched. So updating your devices is critically important. And then also having good malware virus protection on those endpoints to detect and stop malware at the ground level on each individual user's machine, which is where they usually originate. Another part of prevention and preparation is having good cyber insurance in place, and not just buying whatever you can get and forgetting about it, but to really look inside your policy, understand it, and know what you have. So this is another emerging thing we've seen recently, is some clients that have found out some things that were in their insurance policy after the attack happened, and that's not really the time that you want to be discovering these things. So I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about some insurance issues. The first is that many, but not all, cyber insurance policy provide that they will indemnify the insured organization. What does that mean, and why does that matter? That means that you, the insured, are going to have to pay the expenses associated with the breach, and then they, the insurer, will later reimburse you for those. And so it's a pay first, reimburse later policy. Many of these cyber insurance policies are, and that can really matter, because these expenses can be really great. I'm handling one ransomware attack right now where the total amount of the total cost to that client will exceed the $1 million policy limit. So it's going to be over $1 million attack, and they're not paying the ransom. So the costs of the breach counsel, the attorneys, And also the breach vendors can be really high. If you think attorneys charge a lot of money, those vendors really charge a lot of money. Their hourly rates are usually better than ours are. So those costs can really go up, and you're going to have to potentially advance those yourself under your insurance policy. The other thing is if you're paying the ransom yourself, which we don't want to do, but if you're faced with that possibility, you would have to pay that ransom and then you get reimbursed under many policies. And these ransoms can be enormous. We have had relatively small clients with ransoms that exceed $1 million. Not everybody has an extra $1 million or so laying around available to pay a ransom. So, that's an important thing that a lot of people have found out about after they've made their claim under their cyber policy. Another issue that you need to be aware of is that these insurance companies often give you little or no choice as to who you use to handle these incidents. So that means your vendors, the response vendors, and it also means your attorneys who handle these. So that often means you're going to be dealing with somebody you don't know, usually from far away. And unfortunately, we've seen that these are people that usually don't have any experience in K-12. They don't understand how the operating environment, the challenges that face schools, or what the issues and obstacles are. And the insurance companies do this in a number of ways. There are some policies just outright prohibited. They say you must use one of our panel vendors, and here they are. And if you don't use them, there's no coverage. Others do things like change your limits if you don't agree to use their people. And you can see on the screen, these are provisions from a specific policy. It may not be obvious from reading the policy. They do it through a number of definitions and provisions in the policy. And when you shake all this out, it's $1 million policy that only has $500,000 limits if you don't use their people. This also highlights just how complicated these policies can be, right? They're written by lawyers. They're not exactly written to be easy to understand. So if you're reading that policy and you don't know what you're looking at or understand it, we would recommend you get somebody to help you read it. That's something we do a lot of, is read and discuss these policies with our clients. And when you're using the insurance companies, their panel vendors, something you always have to ask and consider is who that attorney or vendor is working for. Are they working for you, or are they working for the insurance company? And you need to think about that now, because many insurance carriers will let you choose who you want to use if you do it on the front end when you're buying the insurance. If you wait until there's a claim, they're not going to bend usually at that point. Once you make a claim, they have all the bargaining power, right? They've already gotten your policy premium. They don't really care. And also, just as a practical matter, you don't want to be spending time negotiating who your vendors are when you're already dealing with an incident. So a couple words to finish up today on responding to ransomware incidents, and what we generally recommend is a response. And one is to activate your incident response plan. If you don't have an incident response plan now, you need to get one in place. You're going to work to contain and stop that attack and restore your systems. Get your counsel involved immediately, and let them handle some of these other things, like notify your insurance company. Don't delay in making your claim. That can be result in a penalty to you. The insurance company, under some policies, can actually deny your claim if you wait too long to make it. Consider notification of law enforcement, and investigate, preserve information so you can prevent it from happening going forward. Paying ransoms, and this is my last topic. Something we've seen a lot more of lately is people considering paying the ransoms. And often that's because there's been a dual ransom. And so we may be able to recover our systems, but the attacker has our data. And so we're concerned about that data being released. So some thoughts about paying ransoms. One thing, as a preliminary matter, make sure you get proof they actually have our data make sure that you have proof they have our data before you even entertain paying, because we have seen where the attackers say they have our data and guess what, they really don't. So prove it. Send us one of our files that you stole, and also keep in mind these people are criminals. So you're paying them to not release your data on the dark web, but what satisfaction or assurance do you have that they won't do that? They're criminals. So what are you getting for that payment? You're still probably going to need to send out notifications to the people who were affected. While lawsuits on data breaches are still somewhat rare, you may still be sued. you may still be subjected to liability for this. So, paying the ransom, to me, the main thing you get out of that is that when you tell people about the attack, you can tell them, hey, we paid this ransom. We paid them to delete the data. So, weigh that in your decision about whether to make that payment or not. One more note on paying ransoms. The Treasury Department has put out some advisories on facilitating ransomware payments that deals with the Office of Foreign Assets Control and entities that have sanctions on them. These advisories are targeted to the companies that facilitate ransom payments, but they gave me significant pause in reading them as somebody who handles these incidents, that the government is looking at who's making these payments and who they're being made to. So as somebody who may be paying the ransom, you may want to consider these issues also. There's a strict liability standard if you send money to somebody who's sanctioned. In other words, it doesn't matter if you didn't know that that was prohibited, you may be subjected to liability anyway. Just another thing to consider in paying ransoms. Because these things arise, the way these things arise, and it's a 24/7 business, we have a data breach hotline that's available here that you can call and get in touch with an attorney on our data privacy and security team. It's really important that you do that promptly and get your counsel or someone competent involved to assist you with that. If anybody has any questions, I'll take them now. If there's something you don't want to put publicly, feel free to email or call me. That's my cell phone number there on the screen. I see one question that was asked in the question feature is that you're to notify MDE as well. Yeah, the MDE rule that came out recently is if it's an attack, if it's an incident that could affect other districts or the MDE systems, then you have an obligation to give MDE notification of that as well. If it's something that would affect something outside of your district, another district or another system, and that's for Mississippi entities only. I don't see any other questions. Feel free to send me an email if you have any follow-up, and I appreciate all of you being with us today for this cyber brief. We hope to bring more of these to you in the future and keep them short also. Thank you.